What if I told you the world's deadliest volcanic eruption is still remembered in lullabies Filipino grandmothers sing today? And what's even crazier, scientists are now proving they're right. This is the Philippines, and we need to talk. But first, a question that will blow your mind by the end of this video. Why do flood stories from a country with 7,641 islands describe a time when the islands were so few and so vast? They were barely recognizable as the Philippines we know today? Keep that in your head. We're coming back to it. The Philippines, named after King Philip II of Spain, because apparently Spanish colonizers weren't big on creativity, spanning 300,000 square kilometers, that's 115,800 square miles, from its capital Manila in the north. This nation of over 7,600 islands is home to 109 million people. But here's what they missed. This archipelago sits on something absolutely terrifying, the Ring of Fire. And I don't mean the Johnny Cash song, located between Taiwan to the north and Malaysia to the south, with China 1,200 kilometers, 745 miles away. This nation holds secrets that predate written history. But here's the thing that kept me up at night researching this. What if everything we know about how ancient people preserved history is wrong? Let's rewind. Before the Spanish arrived in 1521, these islands were home to sophisticated cultures, the Tagalog, Visayan, and hundreds of other groups. They carved out kingdoms like the Raja Knights of Cebu and Butuan, which once sent gold and goods across the seas. They had trade routes to China, writing systems, and something else. Stories, specifically flood stories that scientists ignored for centuries. Big mistake. Spanish rule from 1565 to 1898. American occupation until 1946, independence. And through it all, these stories survived, passed down in Tagalog, Cebuano, Ilocano, and dozens of other languages. But why floods in a country surrounded by water? Because what they were remembering wasn't rain. In 2018, a team of researchers from the University of the Philippines did something radical. Instead of dismissing ancient flood legends as mythology, they mapped them, and what they found changed everything. Filipino flood legends don't just describe water, they describe fire that became water, ash that fell like rain, and darkness that lasted for months. Sound familiar? Because 74,000 years ago, Mount Toba in nearby Indonesia erupted. Not just any eruption, the largest volcanic event in human history. Toba is located just 2,400 kilometers, 1,500 miles, from the Philippines. And here's the kicker. There's a fascinating but hotly debated scientific hypothesis called the Toba Catastrophe theory. It suggests the eruption caused a massive worldwide population bottleneck. And here in the Philippines, genetic studies of the earliest inhabitants show signatures consistent with exactly that kind of major reduction, around 74,000 years ago. Are the grandmother's stories actually preserving this memory? It's a question that's redefining how we think about oral tradition. But wait, it gets weirder. Because the stories don't just remember Toba, they remember survival. Which brings us to the Philippines you see today. Today, the Philippines speaks Filipino and English as official languages. But here's what blew my mind. Over 170 languages are still spoken here, making it one of the most linguistically diverse nations on Earth. Did you know more Filipinos live outside the Philippines than in most entire countries? 10 million overseas Filipino workers send home $30 billion annually. Now let's talk about what makes Filipino culture unique, because it's key to understanding those ancient stories. 80% Catholic thanks to Spanish influence. But scratch beneath that and you'll find something ancient. The flag tells its own story. Blue for peace and justice, red for patriotism and valor, white for equality and fraternity, with a golden sun representing the 8 provinces that first revolted against Spain. The national flower, the Sampaguita jasmine, symbolizes purity and simplicity. The national animal, the Carabao water buffalo, represents strength and hard work. Even the national bird, the Philippine eagle, is a survivor, one of the rarest and most powerful raptors on Earth. That theme of survival? It's not just symbolic, it's the foundation of the Philippine economy. With a GDP of over $400 billion, this economy runs on a secret superpower, its people. When typhoons hit, when volcanoes erupt, the Philippines rebuilds faster than anywhere else because of remittances from Filipino workers worldwide. These remittances are so huge, they make up nearly 10% of the Philippines' entire economy. Bigger than tourism, bigger than mining, bigger than almost any single industry. That's like every single person in Switzerland, sending money to the Philippines every year. But here's what economists miss. The real wealth of the Philippines isn't in its modern economy, it's in the memories of its people. Remember those flood stories? Researchers found something incredible. Different Filipino cultures, separated by hundreds of kilometers of ocean, tell remarkably similar versions. Last week we talked about Australia's Dreamtime, how Aboriginal stories preserve 10,000 years of coastal geography. But what if that's just the beginning? What if oral traditions can preserve even deeper time? Let me tell you one. The Tagalog people tell the story of Malakas and Maganda, strong and beautiful. After a great catastrophe of fire and water that darkened the skies, a bamboo shoot emerged from the chaos. A bird pecked at it, and from the bamboo came the first man and woman, the ancestors of all Filipinos, fire and water. Darkened skies. Sounds poetic, right? Except these details match what actually happens during massive volcanic eruptions. Did you know the Tagalog word bayanihan describes an entire community lifting a house to move it? This isn't metaphorical. They literally do this. That same community survival instinct, it's embedded in their flood stories. The Bicolano flood myth describes ash rain that lasted months. The Mindanao traditions speak of islands being born from fire and water. The Visayan legends tell of ancestors who survived by climbing the highest peaks, when the world below turned to steam and darkness. Volcanic ash can travel thousands of kilometers. Pyroclastic flows can boil seas, and massive eruptions can trigger climate changes that last decades. These aren't just stories, they're eyewitness accounts passed down through generations. But here's what made my hands shake when I read this research. The stories don't just preserve memory of ancient disasters, they preserve survival strategies. Filipino flood legends consistently mention going to high ground, storing food, and most importantly, staying together as communities. Those aren't just stories, they're instruction manuals, passed down through 74,000 years of mothers teaching children how to survive the impossible. The Philippines sits on the ring of fire. Typhoons hit regularly, earthquakes are constant, and yet 109 million people thrive here. In a world facing climate change and rising seas, maybe it's time we start listening to the stories our ancestors left behind. Maybe, just maybe, their grandmother's stories are why. Remember that question from the beginning? Why do flood stories from 7,641 islands describe a time when the islands were so few and so vast they were barely recognizable? Because the people telling those stories may be preserving memories from when sea levels were dramatically different, when this entire region was transformed by fire and ash and water. Did you know the Philippines has more active volcanoes than any other country except Indonesia? Those grandmothers' stories, they're still relevant today. The Philippines isn't just a nation. It's a living library of human survival. And every lullaby about floods, that's not mythology, that's science. What other ancient stories are we ignoring that could change how we understand history? Next week, the only nation with coffee no colonization, and 13 months. Want another survival story now? Morocco episode on Sijil Masa, the lost city that controlled Africa's gold. Link below. And if you want the complete history of the Philippines, from pre-colonial kingdoms to Spanish conquest to independence, I made a full deep dive episode on that. Check it out in the description. It's the perfect companion to today's mystery.